The sound of metal striking concrete echoed through the ammunition supply point at Fort Benning, Georgia. It was 0600 hours on a Tuesday morning, and 30 soldiers stood in formation, waiting for the daily inventory briefing. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brooks, a man built like a linebacker with arms covered in deployment patches, slammed his clipboard down on the inspection table with enough force to make everyone flinch. "Incompetent quota hire!" His voice boomed across the warehouse, directed at a small figure kneeling on the concrete floor. Specialist Vanessa Thompson, barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with her hair pulled back in a regulation bun, was collecting scattered ammunition rounds one by one. Her movements were methodical, precise, each bullet picked up with careful fingers, despite the tremor in her hands from the cold morning air. The 30 soldiers watched in uncomfortable silence. Some shifted their weight, others looked away, but none spoke up. This had become a morning routine over the past 3 months since Thompson had arrived at the ammunition supply point. Brooks and his crew had made it their mission to remind her daily that she didn't belong. Thompson stood slowly, cradling the collected rounds in her hands. Without saying a word, she walked to the inventory board and pinned something to it. A bronze explosive ordnance disposal badge, worn and scratched, with numbers etched into its surface. 723. The badge vibrated slightly as it hung from the board, catching the fluorescent lights. Master Sergeant Elena Rivera, the armory chief, had been walking past with her coffee when she saw it. The 40-year-old veteran stopped so abruptly that coffee sloshed over the rim of her cup. Her eyes locked onto those numbers, and something shifted in her weathered face. Recognition, maybe, or memory. She set her coffee down with trembling fingers and took a step closer to the board. 723, she whispered, barely audible, but in the silence of the warehouse, it might as well have been a shout. Brooks hadn't noticed Rivera's reaction. He was too busy enjoying his morning performance, playing to his audience of 3 close associates who always backed his harassment. Sergeant Rodriguez, a wiry man with nervous energy, laughed on cue. Corporal Chen crossed his arms and smirked. Private First Class Davis, the youngest of the group at 22, looked less certain but went along with it anyway. "Look at her," Brooks continued, his voice dripping with contempt. "Can't even hold on to simple inventory. How's someone like you supposed to handle live ordnance? You're gonna get someone killed with your incompetence." Thompson finished securing the rounds in their proper container, her movements never wavering despite the verbal assault. She turned to face Brooks, and for just a moment, something flickered in her brown eyes. Not fear, not anger, something else. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again, choosing silence. Private Jake Williams, a fresh-faced 18-year-old who'd only been at Benning for 2 weeks, started to step forward. "Sergeant Brooks, maybe you should mind your business, Private," Rodriguez cut him off. "Unless you want to join Thompson here in remedial training." Williams backed down get down, but his eyes remained on Thompson. There was something about the way she moved, the way she checked the corners of the warehouse when she entered, always keeping her back to the wall. It wasn't the behavior of someone who had spent their career counting bullets in a supply room. If watching this public humiliation makes your blood boil, if you believe every soldier deserves respect regardless of their appearance, then hit that like button right now. Share this story with someone who needs to see that true strength often hides behind silence. And for those amazing supporters who help me tell these stories of hidden heroes, there's a thanks button below. Your support means more veteran stories like Vanessa's can be heard. "All right, everyone, listen up," Brooks announced to the formation. "Today's safety brief is simple. We've had reports of inventory discrepancies." He shot a pointed look at Thompson. "Some people can't seem to count properly. So, we're implementing new procedures. Double-check everything, triple-check if Thompson touched it." A few nervous laughs rippled through the formation, but most remained silent. Rivera had moved closer now, still staring at the badge on the board. She pulled out her phone, typed something quickly, then slipped it back into her pocket. "Thompson, you're on segregated ammunition duty today," Brooks continued. "Building 7, alone. Maybe without distractions, you can actually get something right." Building 7 was the old storage facility on the far end of the complex, poorly ventilated and scheduled for renovation. It was where they kept the damaged rounds awaiting disposal, the stuff nobody wanted to handle. It was punishment duty, plain and simple. Thompson nodded once, a sharp military acknowledgement. As she turned to leave, she had to pass by Brooks and his crew. Rodriguez stuck his foot out, a juvenile attempt to trip her. Without breaking stride, Thompson stepped over it, but the movement was fluid, practiced. She'd shifted her weight and adjusted her center of gravity in a way that spoke of years of training. Rivera noticed. Williams noticed. Even Chen noticed, though he tried to hide it behind another smirk. The morning formation dispersed, soldiers heading to their assigned duties. Thompson walked alone toward Building 7, her shadow long in the early morning sun. Behind her, Brooks was already planning his next harassment, confident in his power over the quiet specialist who never fought back. But Rivera was already on her phone again, this time making a call. "Sir, it's Rivera. I need you to pull a file for me. Echo Oscar Delta Unit 723. Yes, sir, I know it's classified. That's why I'm calling you." The morning sun climbed higher over Fort Benning, and in Building 7, Thompson began her work alone. She moved through the damaged ammunition with an expertise that would have shocked anyone watching. Each round was assessed not just for disposal, but for type, origin, and potential hazard. Her hands, small and seemingly delicate, handled the ordnance with the confidence of someone who'd done this 10,000 times before. She found the first problem within an hour. Mixed in with the damaged small arms ammunition were 340mm grenades that shouldn't have been there. They were sweating, tiny beads of moisture on the casing that indicated chemical breakdown, white phosphorus. If they went critical, they wouldn't just explode. They'd burn everything within a 30-foot radius with fire that couldn't be extinguished with water. Thompson stared at the grenades for a long moment. She could report it, follow protocol, call for the EOD team. But that would raise questions about how she recognized the danger signs so quickly, questions she wasn't ready to answer. Instead, she carefully isolated the rounds, placing them in a separate containment unit with proper spacing. She documented everything in her personal notebook, the one she kept hidden in her cargo pocket. Every detail, every serial number, every indication of how these rounds had ended up in the wrong place. 2 hours into her shift, the door to Building 7 opened. Rivera stood silhouetted against the morning light, her face unreadable. "Specialist Thompson," she said formally. "My office, now." Thompson set down the round she'd been inspecting, secured her work area, and followed Rivera out into the sunlight. They walked in silence across the compound, past the motor pool where mechanics were already elbow-deep in engine blocks, past the dining facility where the lunch crew was beginning prep work. Rivera's office was small but meticulously organized. Awards and commendations covered one wall, including a bronze star with Valor device and a Purple Heart. On her desk sat a computer, a coffee mug that read, "World's Okayest Soldier," and a photograph of a younger Rivera in full combat gear standing next to a destroyed vehicle in what looked like Iraq. "Sit," Rivera said, closing the door behind them. Thompson sat, her posture perfect, hands resting on her knees. Rivera moved to her desk but didn't sit. Instead, she stood looking at Thompson with an expression that was hard to read. "That badge, where did you get it?" "It was a gift," Thompson said quietly, "from someone I knew." "Someone from Unit 723? Thompson's silence was answer enough. Rivera pulled up something on her computer, turned the screen so Thompson could see it. It was a unit photograph, dated 5 years ago. Echo Oscar Delta Special Operations Unit 723. Officially, this unit never existed. Unofficially, they were the best bomb disposal experts the Army ever produced. They handled the stuff nobody else could. Chemical weapons, nuclear materials, improvised devices that would make your average EOD tech wet themselves. Thompson's eyes were fixed on the screen, on the faces in the photograph. Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "They were all killed in Operation Silent Thunder," Rivera continued. "Ambushed in Afghanistan. Someone leaked their position to the enemy. Entire unit wiped out." She paused. "Except the records show one member was never recovered. Captain Jessica Mitchell. They found blood, equipment, but no body." Thompson remained silent. "Funny thing about Captain Mitchell," Rivera said, sitting down now. "Her father is Lieutenant General Robert Mitchell, current commander of Fort Benning, a man who buried an empty coffin 5 years ago and has never been quite the same since." Still, Thompson said nothing. Rivera leaned back in her chair. "I'm not asking you to confirm or deny anything, but I am telling you that Brooks has been filing reports about you. False reports. Discrepancy reports that could end your career. He's setting you up for a fall, and he's getting bolder." "I'm aware," Thompson said, speaking for the first time in minutes. "Are you also aware that he's been accessing classified systems he shouldn't have clearance for?" Thompson's head snapped up, her eyes suddenly sharp. "What kind of systems?" Personnel records, deployment schedules, the kind of information that, in the wrong hands, could get people killed. Rivera pulled out a folder, thick with printouts. I've been tracking his access for weeks. At first, I thought he was just a bully with a security clearance. But it's more than that. He's looking for something, or someone. Thompson reached for the folder, her movements careful and controlled. She opened it, began scanning through the documents. Her breathing remained steady, but Rivera saw her pupils dilate, saw the micro-expressions that suggested recognition. "Ma'am," Thompson said carefully, "I found white phosphorus grenades in Building 7 this morning, improperly stored with small arms ammunition. They're deteriorating." Rivera went very still. "That's impossible. We don't store white phosphorus in Building 7. We don't store it anywhere on this base." Nevertheless, it's there. 3 rounds. Serial numbers starting with Whiskey Papa 47. Rivera grabbed her phone. "I need to make a call. You stay here." She stepped outside, leaving Thompson alone with the folder. Thompson continued reading, her fingers tracing down columns of data. Brooks had been systematic in his searches, looking for specific units, specific operations, all of them connected to Afghanistan, all of them from 5 years ago. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Before she could respond, it opened, and Brooks himself walked in. "Well, well," he said, closing the door behind him. "Having a nice chat with the Master Sergeant? Trying to file a complaint about me?" Thompson closed the folder slowly, set it on the desk. "Sergeant Brooks. You know, I've been wondering about you, Thompson. Nobody's that incompetent naturally. It's like you're trying to fail, playing dumb. Why would someone do that?" "I don't know what you mean, Sergeant." Brooks moved closer, using his size to intimidate. At 6 feet 2 inches and 220 pounds, he towered over the seated specialist. "I think you do. I think you're hiding something, and I'm going to find out what." The door opened again. Rivera stood there, and behind her was Major Williams, the executive officer of the Ordnance Battalion. The major's face was grim. "Sergeant Brooks," the major said, "you're needed in Building 7, immediately." Brooks straightened. "Sir? We have a situation with hazardous ordnance. All senior NCOs are to report immediately." Brooks looked back at Thompson, suspicion clear in his eyes. Then he saluted the major and left. Major Williams stepped into the office. "Specialist Thompson, you identified the white phosphorus?" "Yes, sir." "In under 2 hours of being in that building?" "Yes, sir." The major and Rivera exchanged glances. Most soldiers wouldn't recognize deteriorating white phosphorus if it was labeled with a neon sign. "How did you know?" Thompson met his gaze steadily. "I've seen it before, sir, in training." "What kind of training teaches you to identify chemical weapon deterioration patterns?" Before Thompson could answer, an alarm began blaring across the base. Not the normal drill alarm. This was the emergency evacuation signal, 3 long blasts followed by a pause, then repeating. The major's radio crackled to life. All units, emergency in Building 7. Chemical hazard detected. Evacuation radius 500 meters. EOD requested immediately." Rivera grabbed her gear. "That's our building. Thompson, you're with me." They ran across the compound, against the flow of soldiers evacuating in the opposite direction. As they approached Building 7, they could see smoke. Not much, just wisps coming from the ventilation system. But with white phosphorus, a little smoke meant a lot of danger. Brooks was standing outside with his crew, all of them looking pale. "It just started smoking," Chen was saying. "We moved some crates and it just started." "You moved crates?" Rivera demanded. "After being told there was hazardous ordnance?" "We didn't know," Rodriguez protested. Brooks said to continue normal operations. Thompson was already pulling on protective gear from the emergency station. Not the full EOD suit, there wasn't time for that, but gloves, eye protection, and a respirator. "What are you doing?" Major Williams demanded. "Someone needs to contain it before it reaches critical temperature," Thompson said, her voice muffled by the respirator. "White phosphorus burns at 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit. If it reaches the ammunition stored in there, we'll lose the entire building and anyone within a quarter mile." "Wait for EOD," the major ordered. "Sir, with respect, EOD is 15 minutes out. We have maybe 5 before critical failure." She didn't wait for permission. Thompson entered the building at a run, disappearing into the smoke. Brooks started to follow. Whether to help or stop her, nobody knew. Rivera grabbed his arm. "You've done enough." Inside the building, Thompson moved through the smoke with purpose. She knew exactly where she'd isolated the deteriorating rounds. The smoke was thicker here, acrid and chemical. Through her respirator, she could hear the sizzling sound of phosphorus beginning to burn. The containment unit she'd used was starting to melt. The rounds inside were glowing. In 60 seconds, maybe less, they'd burn through the container and hit the ammunition stock stored below. Thompson grabbed the emergency suppressant kit from the wall. Not water, that would make it worse. She needed copper sulfate or sand. The kit had both. She poured the copper sulfate directly onto the glowing rounds, watching as it reacted, dampening the reaction. Then sand, lots of it, smothering the oxygen supply. The sizzling decreased but didn't stop entirely. She needed to get the rounds out, away from everything else. The emergency protocol bucket was reinforced steel, designed for exactly this situation. She used the long-handled tongs from the kit to transfer the rounds, one at a time, each movement careful and precise. Sweat ran down her back despite the morning chill. Her hands were steady though, rock steady, the kind of steady that came from doing this before, under worse conditions, with lives directly on the line. The last round went into the bucket. She sealed it, engaged the pressure lock that would prevent any oxygen from feeding the reaction. Then she grabbed the handle and ran. Out of the building, past the evacuation line, to the emergency containment pit that every ammunition point was required to have. It was 100 meters from any structure, a concrete-lined hole designed to contain explosions. She lowered the bucket into the pit using the winch system, then activated the foam suppressant that would flood the pit with inert gas and fire-retardant foam. Only then did she remove her respirator and take a deep breath. The entire compound was watching. 300 soldiers had gathered at the evacuation perimeter, and every one of them had just witnessed a specialist with supposed no experience handle a crisis that should have required a full EOD team. Major Williams was the first to reach her, followed by Rivera and, surprisingly, Brooks. "That was... How did you..." the major started. "Training, sir," Thompson said simply. She was trying to control her breathing, trying to look more winded than she actually was. "We did emergency response drills at AIT. AIT doesn't teach that level of chemical ordnance response," Brooks said flatly. "I know, because I went through the same training." Thompson met his gaze. "Maybe you weren't paying attention, Sergeant." It might have been the first time she'd ever talked back to him. Brooks's face flushed red, but before he could respond, another voice cut through the morning air. "What the hell is happening at my ammunition point?" Everyone turned. Lieutenant General Robert Mitchell stood there in his ACUs, having arrived in an unmarked SUV. The 3 stars on his chest gleamed in the morning sun, but it was his face that drew attention. Weathered, lined with stress, and bearing the kind of exhaustion that came from years of carrying invisible weight. "Sir," Major Williams snapped to attention. "Chemical hazard contained. Specialist Thompson identified and neutralized deteriorating white phosphorus rounds that were improperly stored." The general's gaze swept over the assembled soldiers, then stopped on Thompson. She was still in her gear, sand and chemical suppressant dusting her uniform. There was a smudge of something across her cheek, and as she raised her hand to wipe it away, the general saw the bruise. A purple-black bruise along her jawline, partially hidden by her hair, but visible now that she'd been moving, sweating, working. It looked about 2 days old, the kind of bruise that came from impact with something hard, or someone's fist. General Mitchell went absolutely still, his eyes fixed on Thompson's face, on the bruise, on something else that nobody else could see. His mouth opened slightly, closed, opened again. "You're still alive?" The words came out as barely more than a whisper, but in the sudden silence that had fallen over the compound, they carried to every ear. The general's voice cracked on the last word, and he took a half-step forward before stopping himself. Thompson's eyes widened. She took an involuntary step backward, her hand going to the bruise on her face. "Sir?" Major Williams ventured, confused by the general's reaction. But General Mitchell wasn't listening. His eyes were filling with tears he was fighting not to shed. His hands were trembling. This was not the composed 3-star general everyone knew. This was something else. Someone else. A father looking at a ghost. He turned abruptly and walked away, moving quickly toward his vehicle. His aide, Colonel James, hurried after him, casting confused glances back at the group. The compound stayed frozen for several seconds after the general left. Then whispers started. Speculation, confusion. Brooks found his voice first. "What the hell was that about?" Rivera was staring at Thompson with new understanding dawning on her face. "The general, he recognized you." Thompson's mask was slipping. The careful control she'd maintained for months was cracking. "I need to go," she said, starting to move away. "No," Rivera said firmly. "You need to explain. Who are you really?" "I'm Specialist Thompson, that's all. The general doesn't react that way to random specialists. And you don't handle white phosphorus like someone who learned it in basic training." Rivera's voice was getting louder, drawing attention. "That badge, Unit 723. You were there, weren't you? Operation Silent Thunder." Thompson stopped walking but didn't turn around. "You're Jessica Mitchell," Rivera said. It wasn't a question. The name hung in the air like another kind of explosive device, one that couldn't be contained with sand and suppressant foam. Soldiers who had been starting to disperse stopped, turned back, drawn by the impossibility of what they were hearing. Brooks laughed, harsh and disbelieving. "That's ridiculous. Jessica Mitchell is dead. KIA 5 years ago. No body recovered," Rivera countered. And the general just looked at her like he was seeing a ghost. His daughter's ghost. Thompson finally turned around. The mask was gone now, replaced by something raw and painful. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Then explain it," Brooks demanded. "Explain how you knew about the phosphorus. Explain how you handled it like a pro. Explain why General Mitchell just about broke down seeing you." "I don't have to explain anything to you, Sergeant." There was steel in Thompson's voice now, an authority that hadn't been there before. Brooks stepped closer, aggressive. "You do if you're some kind of fraud, stealing valor, pretending to be—" "I'm not pretending to be anyone," Thompson cut him off. "I'm exactly who my paperwork says I am." "Your paperwork says you're a nobody specialist with 3 months of service," Chen interjected. "But nobodies don't make generals cry." The crowd was growing. Word had spread about the incident, the evacuation, the general's strange reaction. Soldiers from across the base were finding reasons to be near the ammunition point, to witness whatever was unfolding. Private Williams pushed through the crowd. He was carrying a tablet, his face excited and nervous. "I found it! I found the record!" "What record?" Rivera demanded. Williams held up the tablet, showing a military news article from 5 years ago. The headline read, "General's Daughter Among Those Lost in Afghanistan Ambush." Below was a photograph. Captain Jessica Mitchell in her dress uniform, standing next to her father at her promotion ceremony. The woman in the photograph had longer hair, fewer lines around her eyes, and no bruises. But the bone structure was the same. The eyes were the same. Brooks grabbed the tablet, staring at the photo, then at Thompson. "This is impossible." "Is it?" Rivera asked. "Look at her. Really look at her." Everyone was staring now. Thompson stood in the center of their attention, her shoulders straight, but her eyes showing the exhaustion of someone who'd been carrying a secret for too long. "Even if she looks similar," Rodriguez said, "Jessica Mitchell is dead. There was a memorial service. They gave her father a folded flag. They gave him a flag because they never found my body," Thompson said quietly. The admission stunned everyone into silence. She continued, her voice steady but tired. "They found blood, my equipment, pieces of uniform, enough to declare me KIA, but I wasn't dead, not quite." "Where were you?" Rivera asked gently. "I don't remember all of it. Fragments, images, pain, a lot of pain." Thompson's hand went unconsciously to her abdomen, where beneath her uniform, scars told stories she'd never speak aloud. "Afghan civilians found me, kept me hidden, kept me alive, but my memory, it was gone. For years I didn't know who I was, just fragments, dreams, nightmares mostly." "For 5 years?" Brooks's skepticism was obvious. "Head trauma does that," Thompson replied, "especially when combined with blood loss, infection, and whatever drugs they gave me to keep me quiet while they moved me from village to village, keeping me away from the Taliban who were hunting for survivors." "When did you remember?" Williams asked, his voice soft with awe. "Pieces started coming back about 18 months ago. Faces first, my father's face, my unit." Her voice caught slightly. "My team who died because someone betrayed us." Brooks stiffened. "Betrayed?" Thompson's eyes fixed on him with laser focus. "Someone leaked our position to the enemy, told them exactly where we'd be and when. It wasn't bad luck or poor planning, it was betrayal." "And you came back to find who?" Rivera said, understanding dawning. "I came back because I started remembering things, specific things, communications that didn't make sense, files accessed by people who shouldn't have had clearance." Thompson's gaze never left Brooks. "The kind of things you've been doing, Sergeant." Brooks took a step back. "You're accusing me? Based on what? Your scrambled memories? Based on the fact that you've accessed classified files related to Operation Silent Thunder 17 times in the past 3 months, Thompson said. Based on the communication logs showing encrypted messages sent from your terminal to unknown recipients in Afghanistan. Based on the white phosphorus grenades that mysteriously appeared in Building 7, the same type used in the attack that killed my team. The crowd was dead silent now. Even the morning birds seemed to have stopped singing. You're insane, Brooks said, but sweat was beading on his forehead. Am I? Then you won't mind if Major Williams checks your recent communications, your financial records, the $50,000 that appeared in your account 6 months after my unit was killed. Brooks lunged at her. It was sudden, violent, his fist aimed at her face. But Thompson moved faster. She shifted left, caught his wrist, and used his momentum to flip him onto his back. It happened so quickly that most people missed it, but those with combat experience recognized the move. It was pure special operations training, the kind they taught to people who needed to stay alive in very dangerous places. Brooks hit the ground hard, the air rushing out of his lungs. Before he could recover, military police were there, drawn by the commotion. They helped him to his feet, but didn't let go of his arms. Sergeant Brooks, Major Williams said, his voice cold. You're under arrest pending investigation. Based on her word? Brooks gasped. She's crazy. She's a fraud. Colonel James had returned, walking quickly from the headquarters building with a tablet in his hand. Actually, based on this, he held up the tablet, showing financial records. We've been investigating unusual transactions for weeks. Your name just connected all the dots. As the MPs led Brooks away, Thompson swayed on her feet. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving her exhausted. Rivera caught her arm, steadying her. We need to get you to medical, Rivera said. No, I need to see him. My father. He needs to know. He knows, Colonel James said gently. He's known something was off about your death for years. He never believed it. He's waiting in his office. Thompson nodded, then looked around at the crowd of soldiers still watching. Some looked shocked, others amazed. Williams was actually crying, overwhelmed by what he had witnessed. I'm sorry, Thompson said to all of them, for the deception, but I had to know. I had to find who killed my team. Ma'am, one soldier called out. It was telling that he used ma'am instead of her rank. Welcome home, others took up the sentiment. Welcome home. Glad you're alive. Thank you for your service. Thompson's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for years. She nodded, unable to speak, and let Rivera and Colonel James escort her toward the headquarters building. Behind them, the sun continued its climb into the Georgia sky. The evacuation had been lifted. Normal operations were resuming, but nothing would be normal again, not really. The dead had come back to life, secrets had been exposed, and a father was about to be reunited with the daughter he'd mourned for 5 years. In Building 7, the white phosphorus had been contained, disaster averted. But that had been the easy part. The hard part was just beginning. As they walked, Rivera asked quietly, "The bruise on your face, Brooks?" Thompson touched it gently. 2 days ago, he got frustrated when I wouldn't quit. Caught me alone in the supply room. We'll add assault to his charges. It doesn't matter now. I've had worse. Thompson paused at the entrance to the headquarters building. Through the glass doors, she could see the long hallway that led to her father's office. 5 years. I kept him waiting 5 years. You survived, Rivera said firmly. You came home. That's all that matters. Thompson took a deep breath and pushed through the doors. Each step down that hallway was both the hardest and easiest she'd ever taken. Hard, because she knew the pain she'd caused him, letting him believe she was dead. Easy because she was finally going home. The office door was open. General Robert Mitchell stood with his back to the door, looking out the window at the base he commanded. He was still in uniform, but his shoulders shook slightly. Dad? The word was barely a whisper, but he spun around like he'd been shot. For a moment, they just stared at each other across the space of his office. Then she saw his face crumble, the strong general facade collapsing into pure paternal emotion. Jessica? She nodded, unable to speak through the tears now flowing freely down her full. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into an embrace that was so tight it hurt her still healing ribs, but she didn't care. He was sobbing into her shoulder, this 3-star general who'd commanded thousands, crying like the father he was. My baby girl, he kept saying. My baby girl is alive. They stood there for long minutes, holding each other, while years of grief and guilt and pain dissolved in the simple reality of reunion. Colonel James quietly closed the door, giving them privacy. When they finally pulled apart, both their faces were wet with tears. The general cupped his daughter's face in his hands, his thumbs gentle near the bruise Brooks had left. "Who did this to you?" There was steel in his voice now, the protective father overriding the officer. "It's being handled," Jessica assured him. "Brooks is in custody." "Brooks? He's the one who betrayed my unit. We have proof now. Financial records, communication logs. He sold us out for money." The general's face darkened. "I'll see him court-martialed. I'll see him in Leavenworth." "Due process, Dad. We do this right. My team deserves that." He nodded, then pulled her close again. "When the villagers first found you, what condition were you in?" Jessica hesitated. She hadn't told anyone the full truth about those early days. "Bad. Really bad. I had shrapnel everywhere, internal bleeding, traumatic brain injury from the blast. They had a former medical student who did what he could, but it was mostly prayer and persistence that kept me alive." "Why didn't they contact us? The military?" "They were afraid. The Taliban controlled the area. If they'd revealed they had an American soldier, especially a female soldier, the entire village would have been slaughtered. So they kept me hidden, moved me when necessary, and hoped I would either die peacefully or recover enough to leave on my own." "But you didn't remember who you were." "Not for years. I knew I was American. I knew I was military from the muscle memory, the instincts, but the specifics were gone. When memories started returning, they came in fragments. Your face, the taste of MREs, the weight of my gear, the sound of my call sign." "Phoenix," the general said softly. "You always hated that call sign." "Said it was too dramatic," Jessica agreed with a wet laugh. "But the team insisted." "Your team," his voice grew somber. "We recovered their bodies. I made sure they all came home." "I know. I visited their graves last month, quietly, at night. I needed to see them, to apologize for surviving when they didn't." "Don't you dare apologize for surviving," the general said fiercely. "Don't you dare." A knock on the door interrupted them. Colonel James entered with Major Williams and Rivera. "Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but we have a situation." "Brooks?" the general asked. "In a way. We've been interrogating him, and he's not working alone. There are two others involved, Rodriguez and Chen. They've been feeding information to insurgent groups for years, not just about Operation Silent Thunder, but ongoing operations." Jessica stood straighter. "Are they in custody?" "Rodriguez is. Chen is missing. He didn't show up for duty after Brooks was arrested." "He's running," Jessica said. "He knows we're onto him." "We have people looking for him," Major Williams assured her. "Sir," Rivera spoke up, "there's something else. The white phosphorus grenades that Captain Mitchell contained. They weren't just improperly stored, they were deliberately placed. Chen signed them out of a depot in Alabama using falsified orders 3 days ago." "He was planning something," Jessica said, her mind already working through possibilities. "Those grenades in that location, near all that ammunition, it would have looked like an accident, a tragic mishap that destroyed evidence and maybe killed the person who was getting too close to the truth." "You," her father said, "they were trying to kill you. They were trying to kill Specialist Thompson, the nobody who was asking too many questions, noticing too many things." Jessica's jaw tightened. "They didn't know who I really was, but they knew I was a threat." "We need to find Chen," the general said. "Colonel, I want this base locked down. Nobody in or out without verification. And I want a full review of everyone who had access to Operation Silent Thunder files." As Colonel James left to implement the orders, Jessica swayed slightly. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard now, and she'd been running on fumes for days. "When's the last time you ate?" her father asked, noticing her exhaustion. "Yesterday, I think, maybe the day before. Rivera, take my daughter to medical, full checkup, then the dining facility. That's an order." "Dad, I'm fine." "You're not fine. You've been pretending to be someone else for months, getting harassed and assaulted by Brooks, and you just handled a chemical weapon crisis. You need medical attention and food." Jessica wanted to argue, but she saw the fear in his eyes, the fear of losing her again. "Okay, medical, then food, but I want to be involved in finding Chen." "You will be, but first, you take care of yourself." He hugged her once more. "I just got you back. I'm not losing you again." As Rivera escorted her out, Jessica looked back at her father. He was already on the phone, mobilizing resources to find Chen. But she caught him wiping his eyes between calls, the emotional weight of the morning finally settling on him. The medical center was a short walk away. Word had already spread through the base. Soldiers stopped and stared as Jessica passed. Some saluted, even though she was in specialist rank. They weren't saluting the rank. They were saluting what she represented: survival, determination, the refusal to leave a wrong unavenged. In the medical center, Dr. Patricia Hayes, a lieutenant colonel with 20 years of service, performed the examination herself. She was thorough, professional, but Jessica could see the questions in her eyes. "The bruising on your face is 2 days old," Hayes noted, "but these other scars..." Jessica's torso was a map of trauma. Surgical scars where Afghan villagers had removed shrapnel without proper equipment, burn marks from explosions, a long, jagged line across her ribs where something had torn through her body armor. 5 years old, mostly, Jessica said. Some are more recent. Physical therapy gets intense sometimes. You've had multiple surgeries, not all of them in proper facilities. The villagers did what they could with what they had. I'm alive because of them." Hayes nodded, making notes. "I'm prescribing antibiotics, just in case there's any lingering infection, pain medication if you need it, and I'm recommending immediate psychological evaluation. I'm fine psychologically. You've been through severe trauma, amnesia, and have been living under an assumed identity while investigating the people who tried to kill you. That's not fine, Captain. That's PTSD waiting to happen." Jessica couldn't argue with that. "After we find Chen, I'll hold you to that." Hayes finished her examination. "You're cleared for duty, but I want you back here tomorrow for follow-up." Rivera was waiting outside. Dining facility? I guess. They walked together through the noon heat. The dining facility was packed, the lunch rush in full swing. When Jessica entered, conversations stopped. 300 soldiers turned to look at her. Then someone started clapping. Just one person at first, then another. Then the entire room was on their feet applauding. Jessica stood frozen, overwhelmed by the response. "They're glad you're alive, ma'am," Rivera said softly. "We all are." Jessica nodded, unable to speak. She got her food, the first real meal she'd had in days, and found a quiet corner. But soldiers kept approaching, offering their support, their gratitude, their amazement at her story. Private Williams sat down across from her. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say, what you did, coming back, finding the truth, it's incredible." "I did what anyone would do for their team," Jessica replied. "No, ma'am. Most people would have stayed hidden, started a new life. You came back to a place where you died, faced the people who killed you, and you did it all while letting them think you were nobody. That's not what anyone would do. That's what a hero does." Before Jessica could respond, alarms started blaring across the base. Not the evacuation alarm this time. This was the security breach alarm. Rivera's radio crackled to life. All units, we have a security breach at the ammunition supply point. Shots fired. I repeat, shots fired." Jessica was on her feet and running before Rivera could stop her. Chen. It had to be Chen. They reached the ammunition point to find it in chaos. Military police had cordoned off the area. An ambulance was loading someone onto a gurney. "What happened?" Rivera demanded. "Chen came back," an MP reported. "Tried to access Building 7. When we confronted him, he opened fire, hit Specialist Anderson in the shoulder. He's barricaded inside now." Jessica looked at Building 7, where just hours ago she'd prevented a disaster. "He's going for the evidence, whatever Brooks hid in there." "We have him contained," the MP said. "SWAT is en route." "How long?" 20 minutes. Jessica shook her head. "He could destroy everything by then, or worse, if there are more chemical weapons." She started toward the building. Rivera grabbed her arm. "You're not going in there. I know that building better than anyone. I know where someone would hide evidence, where they could make a stand. You're also the person he wants dead most, which makes me the perfect distraction." Before anyone could stop her, Jessica was moving, not toward the main entrance where Chen would be watching, but around to the loading dock she'd noticed during her morning shift. It would be locked, but locks had never been much of an obstacle for someone with her training. The loading dock's lock was electronic, military grade, but Jessica had spent 3 months studying every security system on base under the guise of routine maintenance work. She pulled a small device from her pocket, something she'd kept hidden for exactly this kind of situation. Within seconds, the lock disengaged with a soft click. She slipped inside, moving through the shadows of the warehouse. The afternoon sun filtered through high windows, creating patterns of light and dark that she used for cover. From somewhere deeper in the building, she could hear Chen moving around, throwing boxes, searching for something. Her phone vibrated, a text from Rivera. "SWAT 15 minutes out. Do not engage." Jessica ignored it. 15 minutes was too long. Chen was desperate, armed, and had nothing to lose. Desperate people did desperate things, and in a building full of ammunition, desperate could mean catastrophic. She moved silently through the aisles, her footsteps barely audible on the concrete floor. Years of training kicked in, muscle memory that transcended her amnesia. She could hear Chen more clearly now, muttering to himself in frustration. "Where is it? Where did Brooks hide it?" Jessica peered around a stack of ammunition crates. Chen was at the far end of the warehouse, tearing through a storage locker. His pistol was holstered. He needed both hands to search. This was her chance. She stepped out from cover. "Looking for something, Corporal?" Chen spun around, his hand going for his weapon. But Jessica had already moved, closing the distance between them with frightening speed. She grabbed his wrist as he drew the pistol, forcing it up and away. The gun went off, the bullet punching through the roof. Chen was stronger, fresher, hadn't been through what she'd endured that morning. But Jessica had experience, training, and 5 years of rage driving her. They struggled for the weapon, crashing into shelving units, sending boxes of ammunition tumbling. "You should have stayed dead," Chen snarled, trying to knee her in the ribs. Jessica twisted away from the strike, sorry to disappoint. Chen managed to create space between them, the gun still in his hand but Jessica controlling his wrist. He drove his forehead forward, trying to headbutt her. Jessica saw it coming, released his wrist, and dropped low. Chen's momentum carried him forward, and she swept his legs. He went down hard but kept hold of the gun. As he tried to aim, Jessica grabbed an ammunition can and swung it like a club. It connected with his hand, sending the pistol sliding across the floor. They both lunged for it. Chen got there first, but Jessica tackled him before he could aim. They rolled across the concrete, each trying to gain control of the weapon. Chen ended up on top, the gun between them, trying to angle it toward her face. Jessica could see his finger tightening on the trigger. With a desperate burst of strength, she forced the gun to the side just as it fired. The bullet sparked off the concrete inches from her head. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, leaving her ears ringing. Chen reared back to strike her with the pistol, but Jessica brought her knee up hard into his solar plexus. He gasped, doubling over, and she rolled him off. The gun skittered away again, disappearing under a shelving unit. Both of them scrambled to their feet, breathing hard. Chen pulled a knife from his boot, the blade gleaming in the filtered sunlight. "You know what the funny thing is?" Chen said, circling her. "Brooks actually felt bad about your unit. Said it wasn't supposed to go that way. They were just supposed to capture you, get intel, but the Taliban had other ideas. So you sold us out for money and didn't even control the outcome?" Jessica's voice was ice cold. $50,000, that's what your life was worth, split 3 ways. Chen lunged with the knife. Jessica sidestepped, grabbed his knife arm, and used his momentum to drive him face first into a concrete pillar. Chen's nose broke with an audible crunch. He screamed, dropping the knife, blood streaming down his face. But he wasn't done. He grabbed a crowbar from a nearby tool rack, swinging it at Jessica's head. She ducked, but the bar caught her shoulder, sending lightning bolts of pain down her arm. She stumbled back, and Chen pressed his advantage, swinging again. This time, Jessica caught the bar with both hands, ignoring the pain in her shoulder. They struggled for control, Chen's blood dripping onto the floor between them. Jessica could feel her strength wavering, the morning's exertions catching up with her. Then she heard it. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving fast. Not SWAT's tactical approach, but soldiers running. Chen heard it too, his eyes widening. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes, it is," Jessica replied. She let go of the crowbar suddenly, dropping to the ground. Chen, pulling against her resistance, stumbled backward. Jessica swept his legs again, and this time when he fell, his head cracked against the concrete floor. He went limp, unconscious. The doors burst open. Rivera led a squad of MPs, weapons drawn. Behind them, Jessica could see her father, Major Williams, and what looked like half the base's security force. "Clear," Rivera announced after checking Chen. "Medic!" Jessica sat on the floor, breathing hard, her shoulder throbbing. Her father was beside her in an instant, checking her for injuries. "I'm okay," she said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "You're reckless," he countered, but there was relief in his voice. "Just like your mother." Medical personnel swarmed in, some attending to Chen, others to Jessica. She waved them off. "I'm fine, just bruised." "Ma'am," one of the MPs called out, "we found something." He was standing by the storage locker Chen had been searching. Inside was a metal box, locked but not secured to anything. Rivera brought it over, setting it on a nearby crate. "Should we call EOD?" she asked, half joking. "It's not rigged," Jessica said. She'd seen Chen handling it without the careful movements of someone dealing with explosives. He was looking for evidence, not weapons. They broke the lock with bolt cutters. Inside were documents, USB drives, and photographs. Jessica picked up one of the photos, her breath catching. It was her unit, taken days before the ambush. Someone had drawn circles around their faces, notes in Pashto script beside each one. "Target packages," Major Williams said, looking over her shoulder. "They were studying you." Jessica picked up one of the documents. Financial records showing payments from an account in Pakistan to accounts controlled by Brooks, Chen, and Rodriguez. The money trail they'd need for prosecution. "This is it," Colonel James said. "This is everything we need to bury them." But Jessica was looking at something else. A letter, handwritten in English. She recognized Brooks's handwriting. "If you're reading this," she read aloud, "then something's gone wrong. I wanted on record that the Mitchell operation was supposed to be a capture, not a kill. We were promised they'd be ransomed back. The money was too good to pass up. I know that's no excuse. I know what we did was treason, but I want whoever finds this to know that we didn't mean for them to die. That's on the Taliban, not us." "Trying to minimize his guilt," Rivera said with disgust. "Doesn't matter what he intended," General Mitchell said. 6 soldiers died because of his greed." Chen was stirring, moaning as the medics worked on him. His nose was clearly broken, and he'd have a concussion, but he'd live to stand trial. As they were loading him onto a gurney, he looked at Jessica with unfocused eyes. "Phoenix," he mumbled through the blood. "You really are a phoenix, rose from the ashes." "Save it for your court-martial," Jessica replied. The afternoon sun was starting to decline as they emerged from Building 7. The entire base seemed to have gathered. Word had spread about the confrontation, the capture, the evidence found. Soldiers lined the route as Chen was taken away, their faces showing a mix of anger and disgust. Brooks and Rodriguez were already in custody, being held in the base detention facility awaiting transfer to a more secure location. The full extent of their betrayal was still being uncovered, but what they'd found already was enough for multiple life sentences. Jessica stood with her father, watching the ambulance take Chen away. Her shoulder was turning purple, another bruise to add to her collection, but she was alive. More importantly, she had answers. Justice. "What now?" her father asked. "Now we bury them with evidence," Jessica said. "Make sure they never see freedom again." "I meant for you. You've been declared dead for 5 years. Your rank, your position, your entire military career needs to be reconstructed." Jessica hadn't thought that far ahead. For months, she'd been focused on one thing, finding the truth. Now that she had it, she wasn't sure what came next. "There'll be paperwork," Colonel James said, joining them. "Lots of it, but we can expedite things, retroactive promotions, back pay, full reinstatement." "I don't know if I want to be reinstated," Jessica admitted. Her father looked surprised. "You don't want to return to service?" "I've been dead for 5 years, Dad. Maybe that's a chance for a different life, a quieter one." "You just took down an armed conspirator single-handedly," Rivera pointed out. "Quiet doesn't seem to be your style." Before Jessica could respond, Private Williams came running up, tablet in hand. "Ma'am, sirs, you need to see this." He showed them the screen. It was a news article, just published. "General's daughter returns from dead, exposes conspiracy." Someone had leaked the story to the media. "So much for keeping this quiet," the general muttered. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Jessica Mitchell, the soldier who'd risen from the dead to bring her killers to justice. The media was calling it the story of the decade. Requests for interviews were flooding in. "I need to get out of here," Jessica said, overwhelmed by the sudden attention. "My office," her father said. "It's the one place on base the media can't reach." They walked together through the chaos, Jessica keeping her head down to avoid the cameras that had somehow already arrived at the base's main gate. In the sanctuary of the general's office, she finally allowed herself to collapse into a chair. 5 years, she said softly. 5 years I've been working toward this moment, and now that it's here, I don't know what to do with it. You don't have to decide today, her father said, or tomorrow, or next week. You've earned the right to take your time. There was a knock on the door. Colonel James entered with a woman Jessica didn't recognize. She was in her 40s, professional-looking, with the kind of bearing that suggested government work. "Captain Mitchell," the woman said, "I'm Director Sarah Coleman, Defense Intelligence Agency. We've been following your case with great interest." "Of course you have," Jessica said tiredly. "I'm not here to pressure you into anything," Coleman said, "but I wanted you to know that if you're interested, we could use someone with your unique skills and experiences. Off-the-books work. The kind where being officially dead might actually be an advantage." Jessica laughed, short and bitter. "You want to recruit me? I want to give you options. The men who betrayed you weren't the only ones selling secrets. There are others. Networks we're only beginning to uncover. Your experience, job, your proven ability to operate independently, to survive impossible situations, these are valuable assets." "She just got back," General Mitchell said firmly. "She needs time to recover, to process everything that's happened." "Of course," Coleman agreed. She placed a card on the desk. "When you're ready, if you're interested, call me. No pressure, no timeline. The offer stands indefinitely." She left, and Jessica picked up the card. It was plain white with just a phone number. No name, no agency designation. "Spooks," her father muttered. Over the next several days, Jessica underwent a whirlwind of debriefings, medical evaluations, and legal proceedings. Brooks, Chen, and Rodriguez were formally charged with treason, conspiracy, and murder. The evidence from the storage locker, combined with digital forensics from their computers, painted a damning picture of a years-long operation selling military secrets. The media attention was relentless. Jessica's story had captured the public imagination. The soldier who'd returned from the dead, who'd infiltrated her own base to catch her betrayers. Hollywood was already calling about movie rights. But Jessica focused on something else, the families of her fallen team members. She visited each one, told them what had really happened, assured them that justice was being served. It was the hardest thing she'd ever done, harder than surviving the ambush, harder than living with amnesia, harder than maintaining her cover. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos's widow held Jessica while they both cried. "She always said you were too stubborn to die," the woman said. "She'd be so proud that you came back for justice." Specialist David Park's parents, Korean immigrants who'd been so proud of their soldier son, thanked her in broken English mixed with tears. "You honor him," his mother said. "You honor all of them." The hardest visit was to Lieutenant Colonel James Crawford's teenage children. Their father had been the senior officer on the mission, Jessica's mentor. "He saved my life," Jessica told them, "pushed me out of the way of the first RPG. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here." "Then it was worth it," his son, now 18 and about to enlist himself, said. "He died saving someone who could come back and make it right." 2 weeks after Chen's capture, the trial began. Military justice moved swiftly when national security and treason were involved. Jessica testified for hours, recounting the ambush, her survival, her investigation. The defense tried to paint her as unreliable, traumatized, confused, but the evidence was overwhelming. Brooks broke on the second day, offering a full confession in exchange for life without parole instead of the death penalty. He detailed the entire operation, how they'd been recruited by Pakistani intelligence, how they'd selected targets, how they'd transmitted information. Rodriguez followed suit. Only Chen maintained his innocence, claiming he'd been coerced. But the evidence was too strong. All three were convicted on all charges. The day of sentencing, Jessica stood in the courtroom as the judge read the verdicts. Life without parole for all three. They would spend the rest of their lives in military prison, a fate some said was worse than death. As they were led away, Brooks looked at Jessica. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. She turned away. His apology meant nothing to her. Outside the courthouse, the media was waiting. Jessica had prepared a statement. "Justice has been served," she read, "but nothing will bring back the 6 heroes who died because of these men's greed. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, Specialist David Park, Lieutenant Colonel James Crawford, Sergeant First Class Michael Thompson, Corporal Anthony Martinez, and Private First Class Jennifer Kim. Remember their names, honor their sacrifice, that's all I ask. She answered no questions, walking away with her father at her side. A month later, Jessica stood in Arlington National Cemetery. 6 headstones before her, American flags placed perfectly beside each one. She wore her dress uniform for the first time in 5 years, the medals and ribbons telling a story of service and sacrifice. She placed a small stone on each grave, a Jewish tradition she had learned from Park's family, a sign that someone had visited, that the dead were remembered. "We got them," she said quietly. "It doesn't bring you back, but we got them." The wind rustled through the trees, and for a moment, Jessica could almost hear their voices. Santos's laugh, Park's terrible jokes, Crawford's patient teaching, Thompson's gruff encouragement, Martinez's singing, Kim's eager questions. "Captain Mitchell?" She turned to find Private Williams, now Private First Class Williams, standing there in his dress uniform. "I'm sorry to intrude, ma'am. I just wanted to pay my respects." "They're your brothers and sister in arms, too," Jessica said. "You don't need permission." Williams placed his own stones on the graves. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "What are you going to do now? I heard you were offered your commission back, full reinstatement." Jessica had been offered that and more. Promotions, choice assignments, a clear path to senior command. She'd also been offered positions with the CIA, NSA, and Coleman's mysterious agency. Everyone wanted the soldier who'd come back from the dead. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "For 5 years, finding justice was all that mattered. Now that I have it, I'm not sure what comes next." "If I may, ma'am, I think you should teach." Jessica looked at him, surprised. "You taught me more about courage and determination in a few weeks than I learned in all of basic training. Not by telling me, but by showing me. The Army needs instructors like you, people who have been through the worst and come out the other side." "I'll think about it," Jessica said. That evening, Jessica had dinner with her father at his quarters on base. It was the first truly quiet moment they'd had since her return. No lawyers, no media, no investigators, just a father and daughter sharing a meal. "Your mother would be proud," he said suddenly. Jessica's mother had died of cancer when Jessica was 15. It had been just the two of them since then. She would have been terrified, Jessica corrected. Then, proud. "You're probably right." He smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him since her return. "She always said you were too much like me, too stubborn, too driven, too willing to sacrifice yourself for others. Learned from the best. Jessica, I need to tell you something. These 5 years, thinking you were dead, it nearly killed me. I threw myself into work, commanded the base, did my duty. But every night, I went to bed knowing I'd failed to protect you. Dad, let me finish. When I saw you that morning with that bruise on your face, alive but hurt, I felt everything at once. Joy, rage, guilt, relief. I wanted to grab you and never let go, and I wanted to find whoever hurt you and destroy them. You did neither, Jessica pointed out. You maintained control like a good general, like a bad father. I should have known, should have recognized you sooner, should have protected you from Brooks. Jessica reached across the table and took his hand. You couldn't have known. I worked very hard to make sure nobody knew. And Brooks, that was my fight, my mission. Still, I'm your father first, general second. I should have been there. You were. Every lesson you taught me, every story about duty and honor, every example you set, that's what kept me going. In those villages in Afghanistan, when I couldn't remember my own name, I remembered your voice telling me to never give up. You were there, Dad. You've always been there. He squeezed her hand, tears in his eyes again. The next morning, Jessica stood before a formation of soldiers at the ammunition supply point. Word had spread that she would be speaking, and hundreds had gathered. She wore ACUs with her proper rank and name tape for the first time since her return. I'm not good at speeches, she began, so I'll keep this simple. 5 years ago, I lost everything. My team, my identity, my memory, but I gained something too. Perspective. I learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's continuing forward despite the fear. I learned that strength isn't about how hard you can hit, but how many hits you can take and keep standing. And I learned that justice might be delayed, but it doesn't have to be denied. She looked out at the young faces, some of them the same soldiers who had witnessed her reveal weeks earlier. Each of you will face moments that test everything you believe about yourself. Moments where the easy path and the right path diverge. When those moments come, Remember that your actions define you, not your rank, not your MOS, not what others think of you, your actions. She paused, seeing Rivera in the crowd, Williams, even some of the soldiers who'd initially sided with Brooks out of peer pressure. Brooks, Chen, and Rodriguez chose greed over honor. They chose the easy wrong over the hard right. And that choice destroyed them. It killed 6 heroes and created a wound in this unit that's only now beginning to heal. Learn from their failure. Be better. "Hua!" someone shouted, and it was taken up by the entire formation. Jessica smiled, a real smile this time. Dismissed. As the formation broke up, soldiers approaching to shake her hand, to thank her, to share their own stories, Colonel James appeared at her elbow. "The director called," he said quietly. "She wanted to know if you'd made a decision." Jessica watched Williams excitedly talking with other privates, watched Rivera mentoring young NCOs, watched her father observing from a distance with pride on his face. "Tell her I need more time," Jessica said. "How much more?" Jessica thought about it. The truth was, she didn't know if she'd ever be ready for that kind of work again. The shadow world Coleman represented was appealing in its way, a chance to prevent other betrayals, to protect other soldiers. But it was also a world of isolation, deception, and moral ambiguity. "Captain," James prompted. "Sorry. Tell her I'll call when I'm ready. If I'm ready." That afternoon, Jessica found herself back in Building 7, not for work, but for closure. The building had been completely reorganized after the white phosphorus incident, new safety protocols implemented, additional security measures installed. She stood where she'd hidden those first grenades, where she'd fought to contain the chemical reaction, where she'd confronted Chen. So much had happened in this building. "Thought I'd find you here." Rivera stood in the doorway, backlit by afternoon sun. "Just thinking," Jessica said. "About?" "About how strange life is. If Brooks hadn't been so insistent on humiliating me, on forcing me into Building 7 alone, I might never have found the evidence. His cruelty was his undoing. Karma," Rivera said, "or justice, or just dumb luck. Maybe all three." Rivera walked over, standing beside Jessica in the quiet warehouse. "You know the entire base is taking bets on what you'll do next. The odds favor you taking the intelligence position. What do you think I should do? I think you've earned the right to do whatever you want. But if you're asking my opinion, I think Williams was right. You should teach, not just tactical skills, but ethics, leadership, resilience, the things that really matter. The Army has plenty of instructors. Not like you, not with your story. You're not just teaching tactics. You're living proof that honor matters, that justice matters, that one person can make a difference." Jessica considered this. The idea of shaping young soldiers, of preventing future Brooks and Chens through education and example, had appeal. "There's something else," Rivera said. "Something I didn't tell you before." Jessica looked at her, curious. "My brother was in Afghanistan 5 years ago. Different unit, different area, but he was there. His convoy was hit by an IED that was meant for a high-value target. The intel that saved his life, that had them change routes at the last minute, came from an unnamed source. I did some digging after you were revealed. That source was your unit. The last intelligence your team transmitted before the ambush was about that IED." Jessica felt her throat tighten. "I didn't know. Your last act as a team was saving lives. My brother's life. So, whatever you decide to do next, know that you've already done more than enough. You've earned peace if you want it." That night, Jessica had a dream. Not the nightmares that had plagued her for years, but something different. She was back with her team, all of them in uniform, standing in formation. Crawford stepped forward, rendered a perfect salute. "Mission complete, Captain," he said. "Not yet," Jessica replied in the dream. "Not quite." She woke knowing what she needed to do. The next morning, she called Coleman. "Director, it's Jessica Mitchell." "Captain, I hoped to hear from you." "I have conditions." "I'm listening." "I won't go back to being a ghost. No more fake identities, no more hiding. If I work for you, I do it as myself. That could limit your effectiveness in certain situations. Then I won't work those situations. There are other threats, other problems that need solving. Cyber infiltration, insider threats, the kind of things where being known might actually be an advantage." Coleman was quiet for a moment. "Go on." "I also want to maintain my connection to Fort Benning. Teaching, mentoring, being visible. These soldiers need to see that there's life after trauma, purpose after loss. A part-time intelligence officer? A full-time soldier who happens to help with intelligence matters when needed. That's highly irregular. So, is coming back from the dead to catch your own killers? Coleman actually laughed. Fair point. I'll need to run this by my superiors, but I think we can make it work. When can you start? Give me a month. I need to do something first. After ending the call, Jessica drove to the base cemetery. Not Arlington, but Fort Benning's own, where soldiers who died in training or service were buried. She'd had a memorial marker placed there years ago when she'd been declared dead. Her father had insisted on it, even with an empty grave. The headstone read, Captain Jessica Mitchell, daughter, soldier, hero, until we meet again. She stood before her own grave, a strange experience that few would ever have. Time to officially come back to life, she said to the stone. She heard footsteps behind her father, of course. He always seemed to know where to find her. Strange, isn't it? He said. Visiting your own grave? Strange doesn't begin to cover it. They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, both in uniform, both survivors in their own ways. I'm taking Coleman's offer, Jessica said, with conditions. Good. You need purpose. I also want to establish a scholarship for the children of fallen EOD specialists. Call it the Unit 723 Memorial Fund. I'll help with that. The base commander has certain discretionary funds available. And I wanted to keep Specialist Thompson's record active. Her father looked at her, confused. She served honorably for 3 months, Jessica explained. Took abuse, harassment, and assault without complaint. She deserves recognition for that service. You want to maintain 2 service records? Why not? I was 2 people. Both served with honor. Her father smiled. You know that's going to create a nightmare of paperwork? Then it'll feel exactly like the real army. They laughed together, the sound carrying across the peaceful cemetery. 6 months later, Major Jessica Mitchell stood before a classroom of junior officers at Fort Benning's Leadership Development Center. Her course was simply titled Ethical Leadership Under Extreme Conditions, but everyone called it Phoenix Class. Who can tell me the difference between legal and ethical? She asked. Several hands went up. She called on a young lieutenant. Legal is what the law says you can do. Ethical is what you should do. Close. Anyone else? Another officer spoke up. Legal is the minimum standard. Ethical is the right standard. Better. Jessica moved to the whiteboard, writing as she spoke. Brooks, Chen, and Rodriguez thought they were being clever by exploiting legal loopholes in intelligence sharing. Technically, some of what they did wasn't illegal until they crossed certain lines. But it was never ethical, never right. She turned back to the class. You will face moments where legal and ethical diverge, where you can do something because the regulations allow it, but you shouldn't because it's wrong. In those moments, choose ethical, always. A hand went up. Ma'am, what if choosing ethical costs us the mission? Then maybe it's the wrong mission, Jessica replied. My team died because someone chose mission success over ethical behavior. They justified betrayal as serving a greater good. They were wrong. They're in Leavenworth for life because they were wrong. After class, Jessica walked to her office. It was small but had a window overlooking the training grounds. On her desk were 2 phones, one military, one a special encrypted device Coleman had provided. The encrypted one rarely rang, but when it did, it meant something significant was happening. Today it rang. Mitchell, she answered. We have a situation. Coleman's voice was tense. Remember the network Brooks was part of? We've found another node, Fort Carson. 3 soldiers selling training schedules and deployment plans. Do you have proof? Partial. We need someone on the ground, someone who knows what to look for. Jessica looked at her calendar. She had classes for the next 2 weeks. I can give you a weekend, she said, but I'm not going undercover. I go as myself or not at all. That might actually work better. Your reputation precedes you now. People are either very careful around you or very stupid. Either way, we learned something. Send me the files. I'll review them tonight. She hung up and found Williams, now Sergeant Williams, standing in her doorway. Sorry to interrupt, ma'am. I wanted to let you know that Chen died. Jessica felt nothing. No satisfaction, no regret. When? Yesterday. Killed by another inmate, apparently. Someone who lost a brother in Afghanistan because of leaked intel. Prison justice, Jessica said neutrally. The way I see it, ma'am, he got off easy. Quick death versus a lifetime in a cell. Maybe. Or maybe death was the harder path. Now he has to face the 6 soldiers he helped kill, if you believe in that sort of thing. Williams nodded, then changed the subject. The new class of EOD specialists want to know if you'll speak at their graduation. Of course, when? Next month, the 15th. Jessica checked her calendar. The 15th was the anniversary of Operation Silent Thunder. She wondered if Williams knew that, then decided it didn't matter. I'll be there. That evening, Jessica had dinner with her father and Rivera, who had become close friends over the months. They met monthly, a tradition that had developed naturally. Coleman's keeping you busy? Rivera asked. Busy enough, nothing like the old days, though. More investigation than infiltration. Good, her father said firmly. You've done enough infiltrating for one lifetime. Several lifetimes, Rivera added. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Then Jessica's father spoke up. I'm retiring next year. Jessica and Rivera both looked at him in surprise. I've done my 40 years. It's time. Besides, this base needs fresh leadership, someone who doesn't see ghosts in every specialist who reports for duty. Dad, it's not a bad thing, Jess. You coming back? It gave me closure, peace. I can retire knowing you're alive, knowing justice was served, knowing the work continues. That's more than most get. What will you do? Rivera asked. Teach, he said with a smile. Like my daughter, maybe write a book. Leadership lessons from a general who lost everything and got it back. Terrible title, Jessica said. I'll work on it. Later, as Jessica drove home to her small off-base apartment, she thought about how much had changed in a year. This time last year, she'd been Specialist Thompson, enduring daily harassment, playing a role that was slowly killing her inside. Now she was Major Mitchell, instructor, part-time intelligence operative, and survivor. Her phone rang, the regular one, not Coleman's. Mitchell, ma'am, this is the CQ desk. There's someone here to see you. Says it's urgent. Jessica frowned. It was past 2100 hours. Who? She won't give her name, ma'am, but she said to tell you she's from Kandahar, from the village. Jessica's heart stopped. I'll be right there. She broke several speed limits getting back to base. At the CQ desk stood a woman in traditional Afghan dress, but with modern clothes visible underneath. She was young, maybe 25, with intelligent eyes and careful posture. You're Phoenix, the woman said in accented English. Who are you? My name is Amira. My father was the medical student who saved your life. He kept you hidden for 3 years while you healed. Jessica felt her legs go weak. She sat down hard on the nearest chair. He's dead now, Amira continued. The Taliban killed him 2 years ago when they discovered he'd helped Americans. But before he died, he told me about you. Told me that if I ever needed help, I should find you. What do you need? Asylum. The Taliban are hunting anyone connected to the Americans. My whole family is dead except for me. I have information, intelligence about Taliban operations, names of other villagers who helped American soldiers. But I need protection. Jessica stood up, decision already made. You'll have it. She made calls, pulled strings, used every favor she'd accumulated. By dawn, Amira had temporary protected status and a safe place to stay. As the sun rose over Fort Benning, Jessica stood with Amira on the same spot where she'd been revealed as alive all those months ago. Your father saved my life, Jessica said. I owe him everything. He said you saved yourself, Amira replied. He just gave you time to remember who you were. Still, without him, I would have died in that village. And without you getting justice, his sacrifice would have meant nothing. The circle is complete. Jessica thought about circles, about cycles of violence and justice, betrayal and loyalty. Brooks was in prison. Chen was dead. Rodriguez would never see freedom again. Her team had been avenged, but the work continued. There would always be other Brooks, other betrayals, other soldiers needing protection. There's something else, Amira said. My father kept records, photos, documents, proof of other Americans who were helped by villagers. Some might still be alive, prisoners or living in remote areas with amnesia like you had. Jessica turned to face her fully. How many? At least 3 that we know of, possibly more. 3 American soldiers potentially still alive, still lost. Jessica thought of their families, going through what her father had endured. I need those records, Jessica said. I'll give them to you, but I want something in return. Name it. I want to serve. I want to join the American military. I want to honor my father, by protecting others the way he protected you. Jessica smiled. That can be arranged, but it won't be easy. Neither was keeping you alive for 3 years. My family managed that. As they walked back toward the headquarters building, Jessica's encrypted phone rang. Coleman. We have a problem, Coleman said without preamble. One of Amira's names, the possible American survivors. We just got signal intelligence that suggests one of them is alive and being moved to Pakistan for sale to the highest bidder. Jessica looked at Amira, whose English was good enough to understand the conversation. When? Jessica asked. 48 hours, maybe less. I can't deploy officially. I'm not operational anymore. No, but you could advise? Guide the team that does deploy. Your experience in that region is invaluable. Jessica thought of her father's retirement, her teaching responsibilities, her carefully reconstructed life. Then she thought of a soldier somewhere in Afghanistan, possibly injured, definitely scared, waiting for rescue that might never come. Send me everything you have, she said. She ended the call and found Amira watching her. You're going to help find them, Amira said. It wasn't a question. We're going to help find them, Jessica corrected. You know the villages, the people, the culture. I know the military side. Together, we might save lives. Like my father saved yours. Exactly like that. As they entered the building, Jessica caught sight of her reflection in the glass doors. Major's oak leaves on her collar, proper name tape, legitimate identification card. But underneath, she was still the same person who'd infiltrated her own base, who'd risen from the dead to seek justice. She was Phoenix, and phoenixes, by their very nature, always rose again. The next morning, Jessica stood before her class of junior officers. The lesson plan called for discussing rules of engagement, but she set that aside. Change of plans, she announced. Today we're talking about moral courage, the courage to do what's right, especially when it costs you everything. She told them about Amira's father, the medical student who'd risked his life and ultimately lost it to save an American soldier. She told them about villages that hid wounded Americans despite the danger. She told them about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Leadership isn't just about giving orders, she said. It's about being worthy of the sacrifice others make for you. It's about paying that forward. It's about choosing right over easy every single time. A hand went up. Ma'am, how do you keep making those choices when you've already lost so much? Jessica thought about her team, dead in Afghanistan. About 5 years of her life lost to amnesia. About the physical and emotional scars she'd carry forever. Because the alternative is letting the Brooks of the world win, she said. Because every time we choose right, we honor those who can't choose anymore. Because that's what separates us from them. After class, she found her father waiting in her office. I heard about the potential rescue mission, he said. News travels fast. Are you going? Not officially. Advisory capacity only. He nodded, understanding the distinction was largely semantic. Be careful. I always am. No, he said seriously. You're always brave. There's a difference. That evening, Jessica met with the rescue team. They were all special operations, all young, all eager. They reminded her painfully of her own lost team. Listen to Amira, she told them. She knows the terrain better than any map. Trust the villagers she vouches for. And remember, whoever we're rescuing has been captive for potentially years. They might not trust you immediately. Be patient. The team leader, a captain not much younger than Jessica, nodded. Any other advice, ma'am? Yes. Come home. All of you. Complete the mission, but come home. As the team prepared to deploy, Jessica worked with Amira and Coleman's analysts, poring over intelligence, identifying likely holding locations, planning contingencies. 47 hours later, Jessica stood in the Tactical Operations Center, watching drone footage as the team approached a compound in eastern Afghanistan. Her encrypted phone connected her directly to the team leader. Phoenix, this is Raptor 1. We're in position. Copy, Raptor. Remember, they might have moved him. Trust your instincts. On the screen, the team breached the compound. For 10 minutes, Jessica barely breathed, remembering another compound, another team, another mission that had ended in disaster. Then, Phoenix, we have him. Alive. Rough shape, but alive. Jessica felt her knees nearly buckle with relief. Identity? Staff Sergeant Marcus Webb, missing since 2017. 8 years. He'd been captive for 8 years. Bring him home, Raptor. Roger that, Phoenix. Raptor 1 out. As the team extracted successfully, Jessica thought about circles again. She'd been saved by Afghan villagers. Now, information from those same villages had saved another American soldier. The debt was being repaid, one life at a time. 3 days later, Jessica stood in the medical center as Staff Sergeant Webb was reunited with his family. His wife collapsed in tears. His children, who'd been young when he disappeared, stood awkwardly, trying to reconcile this thin, scarred man with their memories of their father. Webb saw Jessica watching and gave her a slight nod. He knew who she was, what she'd done to make his rescue possible. No words were needed. That night, Jessica found herself back at her own grave marker, the one her father had insisted on placing years ago. Amira stood beside her, having asked to come along. "It must be strange," Amira said, "visiting your own grave." "Everything about my life is strange," Jessica replied. "My father would have been proud. You're using your second chance to give others theirs." "Trying to." They stood in comfortable silence. Then Amira spoke again. "There are 2 more names on the list. 2 more possibly alive." "I know. Will you help find them?" Jessica thought about her teaching, her father's upcoming retirement, Coleman's increasing requests for assistance, the comfortable life she could have if she just said no. "Yes," she said simply, "because that's what phoenixes did. They rose, again and again, bringing light to darkness, hope to the hopeless, justice to the wronged." As they walked back to Jessica's car, her regular phone rang. It was Williams. "Ma'am, sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know. We just got a new specialist in. She's being harassed by her squad leader. Reminds me of, well, of what happened to you, to Thompson." Jessica's jaw tightened. "Give me details." As Williams explained the situation, Jessica felt a familiar anger building. Some lessons apparently hadn't been learned. "I'll handle it," she told Williams. "How?" "The right way this time. Officially, properly, but decisively." She hung up and found Amira watching her. "Another battle?" Amira asked. "Always another battle," Jessica confirmed. "But that's okay. That's what I'm here for." The next morning, Jessica walked into the ammunition supply point where the new specialist was being harassed. The squad leader, a staff sergeant who'd arrived after Jessica's revelation, didn't recognize her at first. "Can I help you, ma'am?" he asked, noting her major's rank. "I'm Major Mitchell," Jessica said calmly, "also known as Phoenix. Also known as the specialist who took down 3 traitors while pretending to be nobody. And you're about to learn why harassing your soldiers is the worst mistake you could make." The staff sergeant went pale. Jessica smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. "Let's talk about leadership, Sergeant. Real leadership. The kind that protects soldiers instead of preying on them." By the end of the day, the staff sergeant had been relieved of duty pending investigation. The specialist had been reassigned to Rivera's section, where she'd be protected and mentored. And word had spread through the base that Phoenix was watching, always watching, ready to rise whenever injustice appeared. That evening, Jessica stood in her classroom, preparing for the next day's lesson. On the board, she wrote a single line. "From death comes life, from betrayal comes justice, from ashes comes the phoenix." She looked at the words, thinking about everything that had brought her to this moment. The ambush, the amnesia, the investigation, the revelation, the ongoing mission to protect and serve. Her encrypted phone rang. Coleman again. "We have another situation," Coleman began. Jessica cut her off. "Send me the details. I'll be ready." Because she would always be ready. That was her purpose now, her reason for surviving when her team hadn't. She was the phoenix, rising again and again, carrying the flames of justice wherever darkness tried to take hold. Outside, the sun was setting over Fort Benning, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, soldiers were in danger. Others were plotting betrayal. Still others were waiting for rescue. And Jessica Mitchell, Phoenix, the woman who had returned from the dead, would be there for all of them. She picked up her regular phone and called her father. "Dad, want to have dinner? I have stories to tell." Good stories or bad stories? Jessica thought about Webb's rescue, about the harassment she'd stopped, about the battles yet to come. "Both," she said. "Always both." As she left the classroom, turning off the lights, her reflection caught in the window. For just a moment, she saw not herself but her team, standing behind her, watching, approving. "Mission continues," she said softly. And it did. It always would. Because phoenixes never truly die. They just burn brighter each time they rise.
These stories end here, but the journey continues. Many new episodes are waiting for you. And if you enjoy, please take a moment to like, subscribe to our EV Story channel, and turn on the bell. See you in the next story.